Hello, my name is Nathan Fernandez. I'm going to be talking about the biomechanical analysis and kinesiological breakdown of fielding a ground ball. So before getting into like the video analysis and like a breakdown of the phases that go into it, I'm going to talk about the biomechanical parts of that go into fielding a ground ball first. One, it's important recognizing the kinetic forces that are at play and external forces. I get like the glove in hand is a very minor force that you're resisting because it's commonly like lighter and not really getting in the way of the movement and essential to the fielding aspect of that phase. But more external forces would be gravity acting down on your body, going through the motion and having to maintain an upright position, proper orientation, and light feel with the feet to allow good movement for fielding the ground ball. So another external force would be ground reaction forces. And so this is basically for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So with the ground, by producing like with the stepping motions to going and fielding a ground ball, the ground is giving force back up, allowing the body to exert and move it forward into each phase and go through fielding a ground ball. Furthermore, going into like more of the kinetics involved for fielding a ground ball, covering like ground forces already, ground force reactions and gravity. Some internal forces that occur would be like muscular contraction, producing movement for the fielding aspect. And I'll cover like the muscles involved and stabilization and like the fundamental aspects of that when we do a video overlay of fielding a ground ball, and I can break down each phase of the ground ball for that. But for now, I want to talk about the biomechanical principles, including the length tension relationship and then the stretch shortening cycle. So starting with the length tension relationship, your muscles, they work at an optimal length, or they work the best when they are at an optimal length. So for fielding, it is common that fielders will stay in this mid-stance position with slight knee flexion at the tibiofemoral joint and at the acetabular-femoral joint, some flexion occurring there, and dorsiflexion at the talocrural joint down at the bottom. But being in this mid-stance right here, I put my quadriceps in an ideal position for movement and generating force, because there's more overlap of the myosin and actin of the sarcomeres at the physiological level. There's more overlap, allowing more contractility. So that is why fielders are commonly in this mid-stance stage with an upright position, utilizing core muscles as well as back muscles like the erector spinae and multifidi, and engaging the trunk into an upright position so that they can stay oriented. But that is the length tension relationship. The stretch shortening cycle is commonly used in the preparation phase. So as I was saying, the stretch shortening cycle primarily used in the preparation phase of fielding a ground ball. So it's commonly what's happening in the preparation phase is infielders will do a little jump and land as contact would be made with the ball. They're timing it so that contact is made as they are landing. And so that landing, there's elastic energy that is built up into like the knee joint via the quadricep muscles and the gluteus maximus, which are the primary muscles that contribute towards like the approach phase, which would be the second phase of the movement. But that landing, creating that elastic energy stored, helps the body utilize that energy so that it doesn't have to use ATP in order to produce movement forward. So that little jump and the landing aspect is creating elastic energy, which can then be sprung again into movement forward, or which could be lateral movement, or even like posterior, with like a little rotation, some abduction and external rotation of the hip occurring there. All right, so biomechanical principles covered with length tension relationship and the stretch shortening cycle, as well as some of the kinetic forces at play. Now going into more of the kinematic aspects of the movements, it is generally going to be in all three planes of motion, like fielding a ground ball. Even like as simple of a ground ball as moving 2 feet in front of you, going down, fielding to turn and throw. That involves all three planes of motion, including the sagittal plane, primarily with the flexion and extension movements, which would be like the hip and the knees, and like mid-stance, and then charging a ground ball forward. There's going to be the frontal plane, or the frontal plane, which would involve like lateral and medial movement, abduction and adduction. And then there would also be the transverse plane going through, and which would involve external and internal rotation, which is occurring a lot when you're in mid stance. The ball is hit and you need to turn and field it to your left or field it to your right. So internal rotation occurs to provide more optimal positioning of the musculoskeletal system to then propel and use the muscles to push them more optimally in that direction where they need to go. So next, we're going into like common inefficiencies and factors that like contribute to an increase in risk for injury, like when fielding a ground ball. So some common inefficiencies would be lack of range, like lack of flexibility. Commonly in like the hips for a lot of baseball players, a lot of athletes will struggle with poor hip mobility, which would cause like overactive use of the quadriceps, the iliopsoas, as well as your hamstrings complex and gluteus maximus, with prime movers for the hip joint, like when they're doing their motions and when they require rapid motion to the left or right or charging a ball forward. Poor flexibility requires more overactive work from the muscles in that area, which could lead to more strain on that joint itself, affecting the kinetic chain going down and going up as well. Another common inefficiency that a lot of fielders might have would be weak core and weak stabilizing like posterior muscles, like on your back as well. The weakness there would contribute to like excessive lumbar flexion and extension when fielding, which can just mess with the scapulothoracic region as well as the glenohumeral joint, like performing their movements as well, because the excessive motion there, these muscles would have to be compromised when they're going through their motions. Some exercises that would be beneficial to athletes like for fielding ground balls, one of which would be single leg exercises. So performing single leg squats as well as single leg RDL motions, those contributing to strengthening the gluteus maximus and the hamstrings complex. Very important prime movers within fielding a ground ball. Having those strong and ready to go for fielding will put less strain on the joint, like the ligaments of the joints at the knees, at the tibiofemoral joint and the acetabulo-femoral joint. And another exercise that's very beneficial for these athletes are rotational movements. So a lot of athletes for this will do medicine ball slams. So this would involve like planning with the legs and effectively bracing their core, proper placement of the feet on the ground, and just rotational movement, emphasizing power and emphasizing speed and agility during those motions to keep the muscles engaged and ready for when they need to be firing at like high rates for like a fast ground ball that's approaching them and they need to get in position quickly.
In the preparation phase of fielding a ground ball, the fielder assumes an athletic stance, which involves flexion at the hips, knees, and ankles to establish a low center of gravity and maintain balance. The phase relies on eccentric control of key lower body muscles. The quadriceps control knee flexions, hamstrings, and the gluteus maximus stabilize the hips. The gastrocnemius and soleus contribute to ankle stability and dorsiflexion, allowing for quick movements and adjustments. The core, including rectus abdominis, obliques, and erector spinae, is engaged isometrically to maintain trunk stability, preventing unwanted spinal flexion or extension or lateral flexion for that matter. Proper positioning in this phase is essential for efficient movement into the next phase, and loading into the preparation phase also helps store that elastic energy from the stretch shortening cycle as well. As the fielder moves toward the ball, a combination of acceleration and deceleration occurs. The hip flexors initiate forward movement, while the gluteus maximus and hamstrings generate hip extension to propel the body forward. The quadriceps group extend the knee with each step, and the gastrocnemius and soleus facilitate plantar flexion for push-off. From a biomechanical standpoint, rapid deceleration requires eccentric activation of the hamstrings and quadriceps to control braking forces, preventing overstriding. Arm movement involving the deltoids and trapezius aids in balance, while the core remains engaged for trunk stabilization. The ability to smoothly transition from acceleration to controlled deceleration allows the fielder to get into optimal position for fielding. At the moment of fielding, the athlete lowers their center of gravity further to receive the ball with soft hands. This requires deep knee and hip flexion with the gluteus maximus, quadriceps, and hamstrings working to stabilize the lower body. The erector spinae and rectus abdominis prevent excessive forward trunk flexion while maintaining a neutral spine. In the upper body, the shoulders, including the deltoids and rotator cuff muscles and biceps brachii, control hand positioning, allowing for a smooth reception of the ball. The wrists, controlled by the flexor carpi radialis and flexor carpi ulnaris, adjust to the ball's movement, ensuring a secure grip. This phase emphasizes controlled movement and body positioning to prevent errors. The transition phase involves moving from a low, stable position to an upright throwing stance. The gluteus maximus and hamstrings contract concentrically to extend the hips, while the quadriceps drive knee extension to rise. The core muscles stabilize the trunk, ensuring smooth weight transfer. In the upper body, the deltoids, the trapezius, and latissimus dorsi assist in bringing the glove and throwing hand together at the center of the mass. Wrist and forearm muscles, including the flexor digitorum superficialis and extensor carpi radialis, facilitate grip adjustment for proper grip to then throw the runner out. And proper biomechanics in this phase set up an efficient throwing motion, reducing the risk of injury and increasing accuracy.
So, in conclusion, fielding a ground ball requires precise coordination between lower body stability as well as upper body coordination and control, and then proper force application of the muscles with internal forces as well as keeping in mind the external forces that are being affected on the body. By understanding the kinesiological and biomechanical principles underlying this movement, identifying the insufficiencies as well as implementing corrective exercises and strategies to help improve overall performance and reducing the risk of injury is very important for that aspect. Thank you for your time.